Oh, hi, everybody. I'm here with the affinity groups for the United Nations Association, United States. And I'm very excited for this conversation that we're all going to have about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the intersectionality between women, uh, the disability community, educators, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'd like to go ahead and just a quick overview. We have representatives from uh, UNA Women here, Lady T, the Pride Affinity Group, Riley, the Human Rights Affinity Group, Kate, the Educators Affinity Group, Allison and Brittany, Wafuna, John, and then the educators group, which is Allison and Brittany. So yeah, thank you all for being here today. I'm very excited to talk about this important document and how it has relevancy in basically everybody's life. So John, would you mind starting us off and giving us an idea of what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is?
Absolutely. And thank you, Amy, for hosting this. This is great. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was passed on the 10th of December, 1948. And that was in, of all places, Paris. Most people think, Geneva or New York, but, back then it was obviously in various locations that the UN would meet and have their work done. San Francisco being the first place that the UN officially was kind of established, if you will. And but it was done in Paris. And with that, 58 states were. Sorry, I'm in a car, not driving though. But 58 states, meaning 58 member states of the UN, voted in favor, or no, sorry, not in favor, but there were 58 members at the time. But 48 of those member states voted in favor. The rest voted present in order for whatever objections they may have had, but they, in totality, it really was an agreement amongst the global community on what the basic human rights that every country should adhere to. Now, obviously, in current day, and even back then, there's been multiple violations of that document, whether it's been, nations, most people always point to Africa, but it's not something that's just specific to there or Asia or anything like that. It's also in Europe, the Americas, first world nations. And that is something that I believe, and I think many of us believe here, that needs to be addressed on a global scale, but also with maybe more of an enforcement mechanism on how to get countries to comply. So with that, I think that, I'll go into really quick a little bit about my affinity group or the committee that I am part of, and that is the Wafuna committee. I'm co-chair with Tatiana. She's not able to be with us tonight, but she's out of New York, just like Rory and maybe a few other of you as well. I didn't hear everything as to the location um, of all of people on the call, but she's been wonderful in helping co-chair the group. And WAFUNA is the World Federation of United Nations Associations. And we, as co-chairs, essentially represent UNA USA and the interests of the United States in that capacity to WAFUNA, which is like a global body. Think of it like the United Nations of UNAs. And that is kind of, just of what we do. And we just got back recently from the Republic of Georgia from the plenary assembly over there representing the US and advocating for refugees as well as climate refugees and other issues facing the world and co-sponsoring other resolutions of member states. So I will leave it up to the rest of you to complete the rest of what's going on, because all of you that are on this call are obviously advocates and know what the UDHR is. And I look forward to seeing what the discussions tonight will bring. And maybe we can have some of these things addressed on a global level. One of the things that we've been working on in WFUNA, or the WFUNA committee for UNA USA, that is connecting with other member states and hosting similar things to what is going on here with Amy and the Affinity group, the Pride Affinity group. And I think this would be something we could use as a baseline to move forward and move this to a wider scale and bring it to even wider audience, global audience. So look forward to it.
Fantastic. Thank you, John, for that overview, and then also letting people know a little bit more about Wafuna. Um, Kate, would you like to take it away from here?
Sure. So thank you, Amy and John, for those wonderful introductions. I have a short presentation prepared. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Oh, Amy, would you be able to give me access? It says host disabled. Okay, thank you. So can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to present. So hi everyone. As Amy mentioned before, I'm Kate and I'm here on behalf of the Human Rights Affinity Group. And for this portion of our event, I'll be talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, LGBTQ plus rights, free speech, book bans, and the right to expression. So first off, from the UDHR, the wonderful document that John just introduced us to, these are some statements from the UDHR about LGBT rights and getting rid of discrimination. So from the document itself, discrimination against LGBTI people undermines the human rights principles outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. States are legally required to safeguard the human rights of LGBTI people. This is well established in international human rights law. It is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international human rights treaties. So right from the start, they're taking a stance to, defend LGBT rights as human rights, which is super important. And so moving on, unfortunately, even though the UDHR has some guidelines in place to protect LGBT rights, human rights violations are still very common. In recent years, book banning has become a major issue in the USA. This is due to homophobic sentiment, oftentimes that and false ideology that LGBTQ plus books will turn readers into LGBT plus individuals, and for people who have hateful sentiment or homophobic ideas, this really gets them started on, this horrible rhetoric they're trying to spread. And book banning has become a political issue, with conservative states mostly taking the lead and enforcing book bans. And so this is a pressing human rights violation. Representation is important. While there's no physical harm inflicted in this case, banning LGBT plus literature from libraries erases representation and expression. This is a form of discrimination that violates the principles outlined in the UDHR, and it's critical that we take a stand for human rights, ensuring that the LGBT plus community is safe and heard, because we can't all have human rights until all of our rights are respected. And so part two, furthermore, banning books that contain LGBT plus representation enforces damaging rhetoric that it's shameful to be a member of the LGBT community. And this is very damaging to everyone, but especially for students and youth. And it can take a large toll on their mental health, especially in schools, once they don't see themselves represented. And finally, LGBT plus rights are human rights, and nobody should feel ashamed to express who they are. And I found a quote from Human Rights Watch that I think really hits the nail on the head with the situation. All students, no matter their background, sexual orientation, or gender identity, deserve to feel safe and welcomed in schools, libraries, and bookshops alike. Banning books because they contain LGBT plus content is a shameful attempt to silence LGBTQ plus stories. The dangerous practice of banning books is not new and has always been used by those who want to stunt progress, sow fear and division, and hide important truths. This is from Human Rights Watch over here. And so the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. Florida is currently the epicenter of book banning. You've probably seen this in the news in the Don't Say Gay bill. But banning LGBT plus literature falls under this legislation. And for a short recap, it limits LGBT plus students in schools from expressing their identity, and it's overall not great at all for the LGBTQ community. This bill allows parents one thing is to voice their dislike of LGBT plus books, if that's something they're against, and this disapproval leads to the removal of said books from schools and the punishment of teachers or librarians who try to keep these books in their classrooms. PEN America published a report where they said that some teachers, even though they want to supply these books and make sure that their students feel seen, it can be hard for them to do that, or they're under threat of getting fired or losing their jobs. So it's a very difficult situation for many. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has a great quote about defending LGBT plus rights and human rights. He says, "So long as people face criminalization, bias, and violence based on their sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics, we must redouble our efforts to end these violations." And several high commissioners for human rights, UN Secretary Generals before him, and other senior UN officials have expressed similar concerns about this form of discrimination. And then just going into a little bit more about the UNA USA Human Rights Affinity Group. So we work to raise awareness around human rights issues and inspire our members to take action for a safer, more equal world. We collaborate with our fellow affinity groups like UNA Women and UNA Pride, and all the wonderful people there to accomplish this goal and amplify the voices of activists. And here's a quote from the UNA website that I really enjoy: "We bring human rights home where human rights matter the most." And so join us today if you haven't already. If you go on the UNA website and to affinity groups, you'll find this little tab, and the red text will take you to our Slack, which is our main mode of communication. In early 2024, we'll send out a survey asking members what they'd like to see for our events and which kind of topics they want us to cover in early 2024, probably the first week of the new year, which is very exciting. And our events have included this one you're attending now. We did an amazing human trafficking awareness event with the lovely Lady T. Thompson from UNA Women. For December 10th, recently we had a Human Rights Day celebration. We do that every year mostly. In October, we had ethical consumption and production in the chocolate industry around Halloween, the rights of children, and more. And here's some resources on how to stand against LGBT plus censorship. So PEN America is a great nonprofit that really emphasizes free speech and, the right to read and the right for representation in literature, which is super important. The New York Public Library, too, has some great resources on taking a stand against book banning. And GLAAD is a nonprofit that works to defend the rights of LGBTQ plus individuals too, and they have kind of an activist guide for taking a stance against this human rights violation and making sure, that no hate is spread. And contacting representatives too is also a common solution in advocacy. It can be a way for advocating for more inclusive, non-discriminatory curricula in schools. A quick Google search can tell you which senators and congresspeople are representing you if you're not sure already. Visiting their websites, collecting their phone numbers, and giving a quick call about your concerns could bring this issue to their attention. There's strength in numbers. The more people bring up an issue, usually the better, and the quicker the action we can take to making the change that we would like to see. And finally, thank you for coming and supporting human rights. We appreciate you coming out to spend your Friday with us.
Wow, thank you so much, Kate. That was such a comprehensive overview, and it touched on all the groups that we have here today: educators, folks with disabilities, women, the Pride Affinity group. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Um, would Roy, are you ready to go? Okay, awesome.
Always, for days. But I'm only going to do it for 7 minutes. Hi, everybody. My name is Rory. I am truly excited to be here in my capacity as a UN youth representative and the first openly disabled person to represent the United States at the G20 Youth Summit. So growing up with a disability, I was told that I was more likely to experience poverty. When I was diagnosed at age 11, I said I wanted to be president. And when I was diagnosed, my doctor told me, well, you're more likely to be unemployed, which statistically is true. I was told I wanted to, have a successful career, have a wonderful life, get married. Unfortunately, I was told that women with disabilities were more likely to experience domestic violence. Statistically, that was true. They're 3 times more likely to experience domestic violence. And when I said I wanted to go to school, I wanted to get a diploma and really advance myself, I was told by the doctors that I was more likely to have a rap sheet than a diploma. This is age 11. And statistically, that is true. So Unfortunately, I represent the world's largest minority population, but the most underrepresented. And that's sad because we have so many people in our community. We have people of racial minorities. We have people that are religious minorities. We have people that are gender minorities. We have people from all different groups in our community, which makes us wonderful and beautiful and diverse. But also, it's difficult because these issues of disability disproportionately affect people from those minority groups. People from those minority groups are more likely to face unemployment than those that are not from those minority groups. For example, people with disabilities that are white are more likely to be employed than people with disabilities that are Black. And it's really, really intersectional and so inherent in our advocacy. So the other thing that's really difficult and really sad is that people with disabilities are more likely to be excluded from education. There's a lack of services, there's a lack of accessibility, there's a lack of money to actually fund the accessibility, and there's also a lack of infrastructure for people with wheelchairs, particularly in developing countries. These education inequalities are higher among women. There's also a lack of accessibility in a climate response, even though people with disabilities are more likely to live in flood zones because of the aforementioned poverty. And the aforementioned poverty is exacerbated by the fact that people with disabilities can actually get half of the minimum wage under the sub-minimum wages program. Under Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act in the United States, companies can legally pay people with disabilities half of the minimum wage. And in states like Alabama, that's $3.25 an hour. So if you think that the minimum wage is low, try being in the sub-minimum wages program. And it's sad that this country allows companies to apply for like a fair labor standards exception to pay sub-minimum wages in the first place. And as it stands, only 12 states have actually banned this. There is legislation in different states on this, but unfortunately that conversation is not being had among people to get more attention. And unfortunately, in states like New York, we actually have electroshock therapy for students with disabilities, which is really sad. So people with students with disabilities can actually be sent to a place called the Judge Rottenberg Center in Massachusetts, where they undergo electroshock therapy, which is really, really inhumane and exacerbates a lot of mental health concerns, particularly among the people that have survived that. And in 31 states, you can actually forcibly sterilize women with disabilities. And it's very sad to hear all of these statistics. And when you hear all of this, you think that our reality is bleak. You'd say, well, why would you want to self-identify? Why would you want to potentially expose yourself to these types of realities? But the thing is that we are the world's largest minority population, and the only way to increase representation is to disclose. And the only way to increase the conversations is to talk about. The only way to increase advocacy is to talk about it, to disclose, to share your experiences and your stories. And I think that there's a lot of wonderful things that are happening for our community right now, and I'd love to share some of that with you and then give you guys some calls to action on how you can actually advance our rights. So globally, with the internet and with social media, more and more people are talking about disability rights. Like, people can come together. They realize that they're not alone. I know that for me, with social media, I was able to go on the internet and learn more about my own disabilities and see that there is a wonderful reality that people with disabilities do attain higher education. They do have successful careers and they do have successful relationships. And that may or may not be communicated by a doctor, but going online and seeing people that are successful definitely changes perception of self, and it does promote inclusion. It also allows us to have a global conversation about ways to make our world more accessible, ways that we can learn from other countries, just as I did at the G20. And that's really cool. And you get to meet people from all over the world that have similar experiences to you and different experiences from you as well. And I really love that that's happening globally. And I think that with social media, there's less of a stigma. There's still a very high stigma, of course, but with social media, there's less of a feeling of loneliness because you are part of this large community of people. And I think that's really wonderful. I think that there's also a lot more knowledge sharing, and I think that people are learning from their mistakes in respect to disability. So for example, in the Philippines, they actually have an early warning system for people with disabilities as it relates to climate change. In New York City, there's actually a climate response that is inclusive of people with disabilities following a lawsuit and the neglect of people with disabilities in the climate response. And there's a state legislation to ban electroshock therapy. And I think that that's really good. You know, the Barbie movie even has an accessibility option. Comcast is questioning ways that they can better interact with people with disabilities. And that's really, really wonderful to see that people are taking very positive steps to address this. So I guess my question and my call to action to all of you is, what can you do for accessibility, right? And I think that that is the key. You should be asking yourself that every time. When you have an event, give an access check. Have a form that asks people if, you know, they have any special accommodations. And if you have that form to ask people if they have any like special accommodations that they need, it can help you assess the demand for it instead of having to pay for sign language, instead of having to pay for closed captions in case people don't need it. I think that it's important to make sure that the events are accessible, even if people don't disclose because of the stigma. Have closed captions on your events. It's great for non-native English speakers. It's great for mothers with children that are sleeping maybe, and they're attending the event because they want to. You know, there are so many different things that you can do to better promote inclusion. You can make sure that your posters online are accessible. You can make sure that your posters have a better color contrast so that they're easier for screen readers. You can make sure that your posters have alt text so that, you know, people with screen readers can actually hear a visual description of what the poster looks like so they can feel like they're part of this. You can call your elected officials and ask them about disability legislation. But the important thing to realize also is that disability is so intersectional. So anything that you're doing automatically applies to people with disabilities. So I guess the question is that you can be asking yourself is that you can ask yourself, like, well, how does this disproportionately affect people with disabilities? And I think that that's a really great way to better promote inclusion and remove the stigma. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Rory, for those statistics. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, you know, when you're talking about invisible disabilities, you know, you never know who is affected by those. And you know, if somebody, you know, has somebody that they care about that, you know, statistically may have a disability. So thank you so much for that. There is a question in the chat. Somebody's interested, someone who has PTSD is interested in and ADHD, how they can find a list of politicians to contact about all the great information that you just gave.
All of them. All of them. They all need to be held accountable. One thing that's really cool is that I'm part of a group called 504, and it is a political club, so I'm not going to say which party it is, but we actually work with elected officials. We educate them on disability inclusion, and they come to us with potential legislative ideas, and we are a sounding board for them. And it's really cool to be able to have elected officials come to our club and say, well, this is something we're thinking about working on. Or they'll come to the club like once a month and they'll say, well, what do you want for us to do? We're out of ideas, like give us something. So I really love that I've had that opportunity. Depending on what state you're from, I can let you know, and I can let you know about that. But also there's groups called Disability Unite, which are nonpartisan, which actually focus on disability pride, and they focus on empowerment so that you can have the individual empowerment that you need to self-advocate and figure out which politicians you want to contact for yourself. But yeah, both parties are culpable. I could say that.
Great. Thank you so much for that, answering that question. And you threw out a lot of great resources. So would you mind putting some of those in the chat just for people to explore at their own leisure? Thank you so much.
And the other thing is I will put my LinkedIn too. So if you ever want to contact me and shoot ideas, I got you.
Perfect. Yes. And if any other person on the panel wants to go ahead and include their contact information, if you're comfortable, that would be great. So Riley, would you like to take it away?
Yes, I have no idea how I'm going to follow Rory because that was amazing. Everyone that's gone so far is incredible. So, but hi, my name is Riley. I use she, her pronouns. I am a former and now again current chair. So I just loved it so much. I came back of the Pride Affinity group, and I have a lot of really exciting ideas. I also recently served on the drafting committee for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by American Youth. And we have a goal of getting 15,000 signatures by next September. So I will be putting that in the chat because I'm going to need a lot of help, me and my drafting committee and all the other amazing people that have worked on it to help get the word out and help get signatures. So if you're 30 and below, we gladly accept your signature. But if you are above the age of 30, please help spread it anyway. We always need allies. But have a few things to say about the Pride Affinity group and LGBTQ plus rights in general. So as I mentioned, I've had the privilege of contributing to the drafting committee, and our firm belief in this document stems from the urgency of amplifying young voices on crucial issues, both within the US and on a global scale. Immediate action is required to address the challenges faced by youth. For genuine empowerment and the realization of a brighter future, it is imperative that documents like these are crafted by and for young people. And so a little bit about what we wrote. In the initial articles, we articulated our demand and unwavering commitment to fostering environments that not only recognize and celebrate diversity, and that was what all of these affinity groups are here to do as well. The focus for not only this document, but these groups is to ensure accessibility for all, as Rory so eloquently put it, reinforcing the idea that every individual, regardless of background or identity, should have the opportunity to thrive. So the significance of affinity groups cannot be overstated. These spaces serve as sanctuaries, providing a sense of safety and fostering accountability within institutions. They offer a collective haven where individuals can come together, find support, and stand united. In the current landscape marked by contentious debates over LGBTQ plus rights, both domestically and internationally, the need for these groups is more pronounced than ever. Alarming statistics such as the introduction of a record-breaking 417 anti-LGBTQ plus bills in the US legislature this year, as reported by the ACLU as of April 3rd. So there's probably been more since then. Underscore this urgency, particularly concerning the surge in legislation. Over 100 bills since 2020 alone have targeted transgender youth. So this underscores that the indispensable necessity for protective measures and advocacy for not only the LGBTQ plus community at large, but specifically focusing on transgender youth is at the utmost urgency. So as a civic leader myself in the LGBTQ plus realm, I passionately implore people to proactively engage with their local legislatures, not only their federal representatives. As we know, a lot of change starts from the ground up. And if you focus on the grassroots and people that are directly representing you, sometimes even like more closely, that is where a lot of change happens at the state level, at the very local level, because that can, filter up into the federal level. So my call to action is getting us to unite, to support as allies and members of the community, to call out our members of Congress. I'm going to share a link in the chat that is actually a congressional scorecard by the Human Rights Campaign that shows how at least federal members have voted and support LGBTQ plus issues. They have pretty much every Congress going back for a while. They have the most recent 117th Congress report out, which is actually very interesting. And so there's a lot of pieces of legislation, but one very notably that is being kind of passed around time and time again is the Equality Act. It is still not passed, and it would ensure protections for LGBTQ plus individuals. And since there's no really set in stone protection, this would be one that specifically calls out gender diversity, LGBTQ plus identity as something that can be federally protected. So yeah, just call to action on that. And we really must champion, a culture of inclusion and radical acceptance that embraces all individuals across the LGBTQ plus community and all their intersecting identities that are part of that. And this commitment is crucial for, cultivating gender diverse spaces within entities like UNA USA. So I can say that as the new Pride Affinity chair and former one, our group is really committed to being an inclusive space and providing accessibility for folks. And I have a lot of really awesome goals that I'm excited to promote and work amongst these other amazing chairs and other members of the larger UNA community. So I'm happy to share my contact info as well. And there's definitely a lot of substantial work that needs to be done to, promote LGBTQ plus equality. But I think, there's a stat I read recently that 1 in 4 high school students identify as LGBTQ plus. So clearly the culture is changing among young people. And I'm really, really motivated to see, as scary as the world may be right now for queer people, I'm really motivated to see that young people are really changing the pace of this and how folks are the culture around how folks are identifying and just being out there and expressing themselves. And I'm just really optimistic about like expansion of healthcare and, you know, young individuals paving the way for just a change in culture. So yeah, I have a few other links to share. I'll share the link to the Declaration of Human Rights by American Youth, so you can sign on and share that, and some other recommendations I have for LGBTQ plus groups to support besides the Pride Affinity group. So I can also share that. But yeah, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Riley. That was amazing, and I can't wait to hear your ideas on how to promote everything that you had just said. Yeah, in a time where it seems like rights for LGBTQ folks are shrinking. I recently attended a Williams Law talk. This is from UCLA, and one of the constitutional experts said, yes, it's very disheartening that these protections are getting rolled back, or, you know, future protections are being impeded. But another way to look at it is we've come so far that there can often be a backlash. So what we're seeing now is the backlash, and it just shows how important it is for us to all be in, you know, same spaces, having intersectionalism, you know, at the forefront of our minds, and, you know, roll up our sleeves and do the hard work for, you know, trans kids that are really suffering right now, and, you know, trans kids of color, and, you know, kids who have disabilities and also identify as that part of the LGBTQ community. So thank you for that. Lady T, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Amy, for holding this. Okay, are you all ready? I'm here today in several different capacities based on this discussion. So I thank all of the speakers prior to me. Yes, I'm an international gender equality advocate. Yes, I represent several special populations, including one of disabilities, and I'm also the Women's Affinity Group chair. So there are some starking realities when I reflect on gender equality, equity, inclusion, when I reflect on conflict areas, climatic disasters or emergencies, and when I reflect on what's really going on in the world. And so on the heels of the 16 days of activism, I'm gonna share a couple statistics that's going on right now today. There are still 16 countries where women's testimonies does not carry the same evidentiary weight in court as men. There are 20 countries that the law exempts perpetrators from rape charges if they marry their survivors. And there are 32 countries that have no laws addressing domestic violence. And in 50 countries, there are no legal protections against sexual harassment in the workplace. So when I think about the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and how it presents a significant opportunity reflect on the impact and relevance in today's world, especially concerning the rights of women, the LGBTQ plus individuals, and the role of educators in advancing human rights. I get excited. And I really get excited because there are intersectionalities with women's rights and gender empowerment and all of its diversity, as well as equality. For example, the UDHR, excuse me, its principles of non-discrimination and equality, according to Article 2, support the empowerment of women and of every person. It acknowledges that all individuals, not some, not a few, not one or two, but all individuals are entitled to the same rights and freedoms, irrespective of their gender, in all its diversity or sexual orientation. equally the right to safety and dignity. Articles such as Article 3, which for me is a great article. It guarantees the right of life, liberty, and security of people. And it's crucial for the protection of women in all of its diversity. And often it helps to offset the threat of safety and remember that dignity is a birthright. So lastly, the role of educators. Educators are critical. They play a pivotal role in disseminating the values of UDHR. Through education, they can promote understanding, tolerance, friendship amongst all nations, regardless of race, religious groups, according to Article 26. And so for me, the inclusion of fostering inclusivity in an environment for all genders and all sexual orientation is something that we really have to continue to strive for. But I also want to reflect on articles protecting women in all its diversities. The article number 1, the right to equality, ensuring that women have the same rights as men to live from discrimination. Article 25, I love that article. And I love that article because of the special care for motherhood. And let me say this, you can have motherhood in so many different ways, but there's a special article for that. And then Article 7, equal protection under the law. It guarantees that every woman in all of its diversity are entitled to equal protections against any discrimination. So, and the incitement of such discrimination. So one of the things that I hope that I can do today is leave some tips with some respective articles. And the first tip that I have is you too can be a part. Yes, everyone that hears my voice, everyone that's on this call, we've heard some great things from John. We've heard some great things from Rory, Kate, and Riley, but you too can support and advocate. Engage with supportive organizations and movements like UNA, USA, or others that strive for social and international order in the rights of freedom set forth in UDHR and how it's fully realized. I want to give a shout out to both Tatiana and John in your roles with WFUNA. That's fantastic. And then the second is you can educate yourself. Educate yourself and others about Article 26. Stay informed on human rights issues and educate others to foster a culture of rights and respect. Shout out to you, Amy. You know, you're a special human being that you do that everywhere you go. And Kate, Mallory, oh my gosh, I cannot say enough to you show up everywhere. You have no limitation when it comes to human rights. But that's an example. And then the third is speaking up against injustice. Use your right to freedom of expression to raise awareness and challenge injustices faced by marginalized groups. And I can't thank Rory enough talking about those special populations, because we need individuals like you, Rory, to keep on and helping to shout out everyone. I would like to shout out everyone that's being a part of this listening session, because that's the first step. And when I think about injustice, I know for a fact, one of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Martin Luther King in 1963. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we are caught in an escapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. I'm going to leave us with one of my favorite articles, and that's Article 4. I love Article 4, and I know this from the depths of my soul. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all of its forms. This article is so fundamentally correct today as it relates to issues of trafficking in areas of conflict. And there is a connection with the prohibition of slavery and servitude with no short list of conflicts around the world. And so as a result of having conflict, crises, and climatic disasters, human trafficking is often equated with modern day slavery, and it's exacerbated in having populations lie more vulnerable to it. So let's participate in the prohibition of slavery and servitude. And then next, the empowerment of victims or survivors of human trafficking. We have to uphold the principles of Article 4. Victims and survivors of human trafficking need to be recognized for all of their fundamental rights. We have a high populations of the youth that are the LGBTQI+, and we need educators, and we need each and every person that's hearing my voice to help for those protections and rehabilitation and integration into society, and bringing more awareness about it, because the awareness takes us to the next piece, which is the framework for legislation and policy, so that we can offset and have mandates to create and enforce laws that prevent and punish all forms of human trafficking. And I'm gonna conclude with the connection to conflict zones. Migratory communities, when they're in these conflict regions, sometimes there's no way for them to be safe. They're more exposed. And every night I shudder when I think about the women, the LGBTQ+ or the special populations of disability persons who can't get out of conflict zones, or if they're in settlement. And settlements oftentimes they're camps, they're tents. And so a woman and a girl or a special population, when they're going to relieve themselves at night, sometimes they're even re-exploited or more marginalized as a result of a tent, coming out of a tent, because a tent doesn't have a door. So I would encourage everyone, every single person, to know that you can be a part of the change, and you too can be a part of a call to action. And the first piece of the call to action is participate in community dialogues and discourse. The second is practice non-discrimination in your daily life. You too, in a professional setting or in any setting that you show up in, you are a leader and you don't need permission to lead when talking about non-discriminatory practices. And then lastly, donate your time. Donate your time. Donate financially if you can. And I love what Anne Frank says, no one goes poor from giving. And so give of your heart, give of your hand, and give of your head. And I say thank you.
Oh, Lady T, thank you so much for your words. Yeah, you said a lot of things that resonated with me, but like the thing that gave me chills was, as the single garment of destiny quote that you mentioned. So thank you for that, and thank you for giving us, tangible steps and, sort of walking us through different ways that we can contribute. I think that people maybe discount the small, quiet ways that we can advance human rights. You don't have to go out and do something, big and extraordinary, because you might just be seeing the end result of that. You don't see the countless little steps that have culminated in that. So thank you very much for that.
May I add one little piece to that? And that's
Please do.
why it's important. And I'm so proud of Kate, and I stopped singing her name, is her inclusivity into all of the affinity groups is something that I've never seen, and I so will be a sideline champion for. But one of the reasons why the Women's Affinity Group, I know tomorrow we having a 60-second talent festive talent show, but we have CEDAW town halls, and each and every one of you are invited to participate or figure out how you can contribute, because it matters. And the road to ratification in this country has not happened. And we sit in company with 5 other member states, and that's Sudan, Iran, Somalia, Palau, and Tonga. And we're the only developed country that has not ratified it. So you're all welcome to participate. And so that's it for me.
Thank you for mentioning CEDAW. That's also so very important to, a lot of people in this world. So I went ahead and put a link to CEDAW for people who are not familiar with it. CEDAW is the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. There's a lot of acronyms getting thrown around, so I had to read it. I would like to turn it over to Dr. Fouts. Allison, did you have a preference as to who goes first?
Yes, Miss Wright would like to go first.
Yeah. So there's one part when I was reading through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights when preparing for this that really stood out to me, not only as a person who self-identifies with a disability, not only as a person who identifies as a woman, but also as a person who identifies as 2 or more races, depending on how you do your federal paperwork. It's the quote directly in Article 26, paragraph 2. It shall promote the understanding, tolerance, and friendship amongst all nations, racial and religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations in the maintenance of peace. I think that really stands out, not only as an educator, because I feel like in my role as an educator, I have to not only teach my students how to handle their own conflicts, but I also have to teach them tolerance, peace, and friendship in the classroom. Whether they agree with each other or not, I know I did my job correctly if they walk away learning something, whether that is small or large, depending if it's the simple things of like, oh, the issues that happen on campus, or it's what's going on overseas. What are they able to have a very sophisticated conversation with another classmate? Like, what is the most important part of what they leave with the classroom with? And I believe that part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when it comes to the further advancement to education, is so important now, especially when we have conversations about what happens with artificial intelligence, what happens with what is going on around the world. I'm constantly getting asked all the time by my students, like, what is going on? And I have to explain it to them in such the simplest terms that sometimes it can be really difficult, but having those difficult conversations can allow us to have the better understanding of what is going on internationally and maintaining that peace and being able to kind of, carry that mantle to that next generation. And I will turn over the next part about this to Dr. Fouts.
Thanks, Allie. You're the best. Sorry. It was funny. Somebody was mentioning Comcast internet earlier in their panel discussion. And I was like, wow, I wish I had Comcast. I have Mediacom. And that's why I'm using my phone right now for Verizon. But to be honest, hi, everybody. I am Brittany Fouts. I work with Raditya, and we are the 2 co-chairs for the Higher Education Commission Affinity Group. And Raditya's busy. He had to teach late tonight, so he's not here. But I'm here to represent us both, and we are looking for engagement 100% if anybody wants to get involved. And to be honest, I know we're mostly focused on higher education, but we also do a lot with K through 12 in case anybody's interested. But the reason that I really wanted to be part of this panel discussion tonight, after talking to Amy, is that, and Allie, Amy and Allie, is that a lot of my work has focused on recently. I spent my entire life working at the United Nations, and it's been a lot of really tough stuff, working with child soldiers all over the world, been trafficking victims. Then I finally settled down here in the East Coast of the US, not too far from DC. And I've realized that coming here back to DC, the DC area, that holy heck, like a lot of the stuff that I used to do internationally, like it still continues. So I do a lot of work in alternative schools, and that's what our UNA location does, and a lot are with our affinity group. And we've realized that, you would think that, sending yourself to a public institution, you would get all of your human rights acknowledged, but no. And I find it very frustrating that there's a lot of teachers that are being trained to go into schools and they only have like a basic training education. So here I am at a university working in teaching, and then I find out that my education department is training teachers to go into schools, but you're not training teachers that are in any kind of expertise level in terms of like special education or anything that's really needed for a lot of schools. So why am I, as a college professor, being required? And I love it. I take it for fun, like just to make myself a better person and to learn and to develop myself and to be there for students. And that's the whole thing, just to be there for students. Why am I training myself to do this? And we've got at my university, and it happens at a lot of universities, we're training teachers to not have any kind of expertise in like special education or any kind of like micro specialization or something. And or I would actually call it macro specialization, but it's to me it's very frustrating, and a lot of that has led me to join the UNA and the affinity group. I've always been with the UNA even as a college student, but now to be part of them as a professor and to be working with my students, I'm hoping that there's a lot that we can change in the country, and in the world, of course. But that's one of our small projects, and we're always welcome to opening up new people. And to be honest, our higher education group, it's so small. So Allie and I even developed a presentation for tonight. But to be honest, this is just me speaking from the heart and a lot of stuff that we're working on. So this is a very special day and event. So I'm very thankful that you guys are including me. And I can always include my contact info in the chat box. So it's nice to meet you all. Thanks. Thank you. And Lady T, I saw you at the leadership event. We were sitting right by one another. You were on the right, I was on the left.
I love that. Thank you so much, Brittany, Dr. Fouts.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, being here tonight, of course, and then, showing up for your students. Like I think that people kind of take for granted that educators are there for students. And, I've had educators in my family, and I know that burnout is real because, there's a lack of resources and things like that. So I know it can be hard work, but it's such crucial work. So thank you. Thank you and Allison for doing that work.
Thank you. Y'all
Yeah.
are awesome. Thank you.
Yes, you all are awesome. Yeah, so I just want to open it up to, any questions people might have, even, fellow panelists. If you have a question for any of our experts, please feel free to go on and ask him.
Can we have a follow-up email where we can all get links to support each other's work? I think that would be great, because I don't know about you guys, but I can't save the chat and I want to get involved. And if there's any way to promote intersectionality, or if you guys need our community to lend a hand, we will happily lend a hand, So I would love to stay in touch and figure out ways to to collaborate with each other.
Absolutely.
Rory just in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I welcome that. And to save the chat, if you go to the little three dots where the chat is at, go down to the bottom, it's 3 dots, and then you say save chat. That's how you save the chat. But I welcome that, and I really highly encourage each and every one of the groups to really see how we can get involved. I know, and I believe it's January the 18th will be our next youth-led CEDAW, and all of this has intersectionality into what CEDAW is. So I can't encourage that enough. But one of the things that I would like to leave when I think about this wonderful discussion, this discourse that we have. And again, thank you, Amy. The Women's Affinity Group will always support you. I can't say it enough, you're a fantastic human being. And gender equity, gender equality, and gender inclusion are not just rights. They truly are birthrights of every individual, and every individual deserves dignity, and they form the foundation of what this society, where each person needs to be valued, not just for their not just before their gender or their gender identity, but for their sense of humanity in this world. And I know I can't stop talking about the conflicts, the crises, and the climatic disasters that's going on, but I want to encourage everyone to remember that every person's potential is unlimited. And thank you for tapping on that, Rory, when you gave some of the startling statistics about what is told to people of special populations, and particularly if you're a BIPOC, of the BIPOC community, it's even more grave. So I want to encourage people to know that their dreams are unbound by the constraints or biases that exist, and that we all, you and me, can be a part of this, of taking the scales of gender equality, or taking the scales of equity and equality and inclusion, and making them balance, and that the spectrum of humanity is celebrated in its vibrant entirety, which includes everyone, you and I.
Beautiful. More chills. More chills. Would anybody else like to ask any questions? Even if you want to drop them in the chat, I can read them out. If not, or while you're thinking of questions, oh, actually, Kate, go for it.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Amy. Raised a hand just because I didn't want to cut you off. Not a question, but a statement. Just want to say I'm in awe. I typed in the chat of all of you, all of the speakers on this panel, are doing such great work to make this world a more equal, more humanitarian space. Just want to say it's been wonderful to meet you all virtually. And echoing what Rory said, hopefully we can all stay in touch and uplift each other's work. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, that's great. And if the speakers wouldn't mind emailing me some links that you may have mentioned, or you may think of in between, now and when we, send this recording out to participants, that'd be great. And I can have that as a companion. Yeah, because you've all mentioned such great resources. So thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Comments? No? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank all of you so much for your participation. Hopefully this is the first conversation and collaboration of many between all of us and our respective affinity groups. You are all welcome to those who are joining us. If you're not UNA USA members, please consider joining. And I went ahead and dropped a link in the chat for the affinity group. So once you're a member of UNA USA, you can sign up for as many affinity groups as you would like. That would be fantastic. And then special message to any educators out there. If you'd like to join the fantastic work that Allison and Brittany are doing, yeah, please reach out. And with that, I will let you all have your Friday nights back, and I hope you all have happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy
All the best.
holidays. Thank you, everyone.